Okay, Paul, go ahead and however you want to do it first, if you want to, whoops, you muted yourself.
I think maybe I got it.
Yeah, you got it unmuted. Yep, yep.
Okay. Well, let me explain that I'm in the Advent South Medical Facility in Overland Park, Kansas. The second hospital stop over the last 3 days. On Saturday, we dug in the morning a little bit, and then I went out to work on the farm for a little bit. And in the process, I trusted a bar that used to be holding the door on the John Deere tractor. I've used it for some time with no awareness that it was about to give way. But as I started to get out of the tractor, standing at about 4.5, maybe 5 feet high, I grabbed the bar, it popped loose, and I did a somersault in the air, landing on my head and back on very hard packed ground. And it was knocked the wind out of me, and I couldn't. My nephew was within 10 paces when he was on his back working on machinery. He didn't hear me, he didn't see me, and so it took a while before he realized I was incommunicado, and so he finally came out and helped me get up, and he helped me. Well, he went and got my car and made so I could get in and drive to Leon to the hospital, 25 miles. And I got to the hospital and honked at the emergency door, and they came out with a wheelchair and gathered me in. They conducted a series of tests and decided that I didn't have anything broken, and so therefore, if I could show them that I could walk, I could go home. And so I showed them that I could walk, and I went home. Drove back to Lamoni, and in the meantime, my kids were hearing about it. Almana dropped everything to come take care of her dad. She got there about 8. I had been given some pain medicine at the hospital, but I got home without being able to find it. She found it in the recesses of the front seat. And so I did have some pain medicine. That's 6 hours per shot. I mean, per pill. Well, I had the obligation to speak at Lamoni, the large congregation, on Sunday. And that's such a rare privilege. I haven't had that privilege except was when I was in high school, and that's 60 years ago. And so I don't know what I said there that was so offensive, but anyway, the fact that I got to be invited back to speak at Lamoni was such an honor that I didn't want to miss that, in spite of the fact that I was hurting pretty badly. Almana, being on my side, helped out and made it so that I asked her to read the poems, and that gave us a change of voice. And the people of Lamoni were very responsive, receptive. I staggered out of the church, hurting pretty badly. We got home, and Tessa and Abby Barnes were there to check on me. And Tessa, the girls wanted me to go home to Kansas and get another opinion because, well, yeah, it was clearly a bad fall. Well, Tessa highlighted that I was gasping. I was, what's the word? She noted that the gasping and my breathing was the kind of thing that might indicate a blood clot. And since I've had to deal with that previously, I was convinced on that basis to come home with Almana. She did a beautiful job driving, tried to avoid all of the pitfalls of the highway, but that meant more swerving, so that sort of compensated. No, but she did a beautiful job driving, and we passed, I think, 12 hospitals in order to get me back to the one where I had the prostate surgery back in July. And they took good care of me, and they're doing it again. They re-examined and determined that I have 3 broken bones in my back, There's 3 vertebrae that are broken, and so the current plan is that on Thursday, if everything else works out, that they will reach into my vertebral column and fill the cracks with glue and stick my bones back together again. And this is such a remarkable form of magic. I've got to try it. So that's the current plan and the hope for success. Otherwise, I could be miserable for many months because I've got to wait for the bones to heal. So at this point, Abigail Barnes is in charge at the Joseph Smith Historic Site. I'm greatly relieved to have been able to handle the preaching assignment on Sunday, and life goes on. I thank you all for your prayers and concern, because while I haven't been current on my Facebook or other accounts, I'm aware that people have been spreading the news, and I am grateful for all the support I've had. It is remarkable that I've come away with as little injury as I did, because an old man doing a somersault in the air and landing without a bat, probably not a good idea. But then on the other hand, it was an accident, so they do happen. Sometimes we have to account for them. Nonetheless, you can also account for the blessing. In this case, I feel remarkably blessed, not only by the action on the spot, but also the simple fact that I've been getting really good care. So thank you all for that.
Thank you.
Well, that's amazing, Paul, that you broke 3 vertebrae and they didn't find it.
Well, yeah, there's some question about, well, I guess it's not that unusual for farmers to drive themselves in and want to get themselves out as quickly as they can. Okay, well, let's proceed with our regular Monday night program. Tonight is a review session. We have had presentations from the Choctaw Brothers, Rainbow Eagle, and Little Eagle, native traditions in the scriptures. We're going to ask David Ferriman to go first tonight on his presentation on homeopathy, and we'll pause for questions on that one to accommodate him. Scott Forsyth gave us a presentation on the comparison of plans in the Book of Mormon. Rick Gaydusek was here, and he shared with us about the testimonies that appear among the Native Americans that appear to have a Jewish background. And then Rick Bennett gave us a presentation on the stewardship shift. Paul Lucero was not available to share his testimony, but will be coming on November 11. And so we can defer that one. And then Ron Smith shared with us Daniel's prophecy as seen in the Book of Mormon. And so we'll begin with David Ferriman, but let's actually begin with prayer as usual. Awesome Creator, designer of the universe, one beyond time and space, we bow to say thank you for you who make room for us and for providing us with prospects for eternal life. This evening we spend with you in hopes we may find significant elements that bring us closer to you, to see our reflection in the other parts of your creation, and to feel a touch of your spirit as we pray for it to pass, for it to cross, for it to bless our nation. In context of destinies, we see infinitesimally small. We seem to be infinitesimally small. However, you call us each by name and have given us each individual call. You have seen fit to provide milkweeds, although toxic to humans and they're essential to the monarch butterfly. And the monarch flies 2,000 miles in the fourth generation to go to Mexico. And then the next generation flies back north, the same 2,000 miles. And then there's two generations in between. But the round trip of 4,000 miles by a beautiful butterfly is reminding to us how significant it is, this round trip that we make in the cycle of life. And so we see their beauty, but yet worms they were, and they have been resurrected. And so we can see for ourselves our duty to respond to your plan. We pray in the name of Jesus, and ask for your Spirit to be with us. Amen. All right, David Ferriman, by your request, the floor is yours.
Thank you for allowing me to go first, and I apologize, everyone.
Excuse me, David.
Yes.
As I recall, your event is near Cameron.
What's that?
Your event next weekend is near Cameron, Missouri?
Yes. Yeah, it's a park we're trying to be close to Adamon-Diamond.
Okay. There is another event I'd like to advertise on the 30th of October. There will be a Book of Mormon discussion at the LDS Church in Cameron. And I've been invited to be the Master of Ceremonies for that discussion. And so anyone in the area that's available and interested, I think it's at 7 o'clock for that event. And so yours this weekend, and that one a week or so later, makes it so that Cameron is getting a dose of our spirituality. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody that would like to come, our event's the 19th. We're starting at 10 o'clock. Information's on the website. And it's going all day. We're going to be providing basically meat for lunch, and then otherwise it's kind of potluck. But basically we'll be hanging out, fellowshipping, and after lunch we'll probably do blessings and have a testimony meeting. But it's a non-denominational, just kind of gathering. So I did a presentation on I can never say the word right, homeopathy. And basically, and I'm not very good at these recaps, I went over what homeopathy originally was, in spite of what people kind of tend to think about it today, and this idea of like curing like and the law of minimum dose. And then I'll quickly just review and say that one example is if you can't sleep, then you should make a remedy with a small amount of coffee or caffeinated drink, because caffeine normally keeps you awake. So using a little bit of that should then help you go to sleep. It seems counterintuitive, but there are people who say that it works for them. So then the other thing I reviewed was the idea of herbal medicine. And this is something where we, as human beings for thousands of years, have discovered that certain plants and herbs help us when we are not well. And then, of course, the final one was the miracle working, the idea of giving people blessings, commanding people to be healed. And I went over some of the things that Jesus did to heal people, with the understanding that Jesus said that the miracles that he did, we will also do. And so therefore, they're things that we should look for. And in my mind, there's no reason why we can't do a combination of these. And in addition to that, also make sure to continue seeing a medical doctor. I do believe that the Lord gave us our intelligence, and that means that even doctors who don't believe in God and come up with cures, I still believe that they are inspired by the Lord to help heal us. And so even though I didn't get in depth into medical knowledge, I did begin the presentation by issuing a disclaimer that this is not, I am not a doctor. I do not play a doctor on TV, and the advice from a professional medical person who has training would be way better than anything I'm going to give you in a presentation. The last thing I went over, and I didn't really go over very well because I didn't have a very good bit of, well, actually before that, I also went over the wisdom of Zipporah, which is in 4th Moses from the Plates of Brass, which is something that the fellowship offers free online. Anyone who wants to read that, and the plants that and the things that she said could help you. And the last thing that I discussed was the idea of priesthood versus priestcraft, and I didn't have a slide for it, and I don't remember what I said. And so I am going to share with you quickly in closing that back in 2016, I was putting together the Book of Avar, and I had some questions about this idea of, if the Bible says that we're not supposed to do any kind of sorcery or witchcraft or whatever, why is it that Joseph Smith has this magical worldview? Why is it that he is using a stone and a hat, or even glasses, what have you? Why is it that Oliver Cowdery's told in Revelation that his divining rod is his gift? And the answer that I received is in our scriptures, Doctrines of the Saints, which is a collection of revelations from Joseph Smith on through to today. It's a compilation. Basically, what the Lord told me was that anything that God does, Satan tries to mimic and copy. And so therefore, the idea of priestcraft is when we do things without the Lord's will, without the Lord's consent, not to help other people, but rather for ourselves. And it's not real. It's an illusion of God's power, because God has the ultimate power. So to kind of recap real quickly, God gave us plants, God gave us medicine, God gave us the Holy Spirit. And if we prayerfully take our medical needs to the Lord genuinely, then I do believe that he will give us revelations. The Holy Spirit will testify to us and teach us how to heal our bodies and how to get where we need to be. And yes, there are people out there practicing priestcraft, but at the end of the day, if we have a proper connection with the Lord, what we really need to focus on is that, and the Lord will take care of us. That's my quick recap. Thoughts, questions?
Thank you for the recap. I would like to probe just a little bit more on the homeopathy, because it seems to me that the seeds we plant are the kinds of seeds we typically can harvest, and yet we somehow get some weeds in there too. Where do weeds come from?
Where do weeds come from?
Yeah.
Excellent soil that is not tended to properly. Where do weeds come from?
Weeds aren't weeds.
Oh,
Weeds are something that we've decided are weeds.
Christine says that weeds are not weeds. Weeds are the things that we call weeds.
All right. Thank you, Christine.
No problem.
So I personally believe that the reason why things work is because, at least in part, because we have faith in them. Cancer treatment is an amazing thing to me, because the same treatment to the same type of cancer doesn't always work every time. And I do think that faith plays a part in that.
Mm-hmm.
As a logical person, I look at the idea of taking coffee, a little bit of it, and putting it into something to make a concoction and drinking that to go to sleep. And I don't have the faith that it would work. And so therefore, that's my weed. I'm letting that choke my faith so that it wouldn't work for me. But I'm not going to stop somebody else from doing it, because if it works for them, then that's God in their life. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a good answer. And I agree, Christine, that we tend to make the weeds because we have things growing in the wrong places. We want them growing in the right place.
I will say one thing. I have a friend up in Oregon. He's been to a couple of these meetings, I think. He worked with, I believe he's working with Philip Cloudpiler to put together this area where there are no weeds and everything that's growing is there to feed, uses medicine, what have you, and the whole thing just works as this. What's it called? Permaculture. Yeah, permaculture. I do not know anything about that, but there's a guy who will tell you there's no such thing as weeds, and he has the proof to back it up.
All right. Well, I remember as a kid tasting the milk on the milkweed stem, and it was bitter. And to then discover that these butterflies would land there, lay their eggs, the larvae would come survive on those milkweeds and produce the chrysalis that then turned out the beautiful butterfly. Such an amazing transformation. What a beautiful parable. And so to appreciate that we may be, all of us, in the pupa stage, in the worm stage, needing to be messed with a little bit in order to get us to come out more beautifully.
The other thing too is that there are some things that we just don't know what to do with. All of my life, I thought you couldn't eat acorns, and just last month, I happened on a YouTube video explaining how to boil them so you can eat them, and I'm like, these things are edible. I've been throwing them out my whole life. So somebody that's wiser than me can do amazing things with stuff that I don't know anything about.
Right.
Okay. Rick Gaydusek, Kenneth, I see your hand. You'll go after Rick. Go ahead, please, Rick.
Okay, so Paul, I want to know, after you tasted the milkweed, did you have an urge to go to Mexico?
Matter of fact, I did.
You spread your
However,
wings.
I missed the place where the where the butterflies gathered. I need to go back and see that, because to have butterflies gathered to the point that they break the limbs down on the trees has to be something awesome.
I knew a guy that collected them during World War II, milkweeds, and he got paid for them, the pods, because they stuffed life jackets, preservers for the Navy guys with those milkweed. What do you call it? The fluffy stuff.
Odds, yeah.
Yeah. But I have a question for Dave. Dave, how do you feel about the Urim and Thummim mentioned in the Old Testament as something they were to consult for God's decision?
So I have several opinions on that. I genuinely believe that the Lord gives us spiritual tools. So I was talking to someone not long ago, and they were asking, like, well, why do you need this? Why would Joseph Smith need this? Why would, so-and-so need that? And the response I gave was, my dad asked me to carry his printer upstairs a couple of weeks before I had this conversation, and it was heavy. And I was able to do it by myself. But if one of my sons would have come and like assisted with the lifting, it would have been a little faster, a little bit more efficient. And so I believe that the Lord gives us tools to use to help assist in that give us a spiritual lift, if you will. I think it's easier to have faith in things when it's part of your worldview. So I think I believe that as Latter-day Saints, if someone were to say, here's an Urim and Thummim, the Lord wants you to go do something with it, we would be like, oh, okay, I'll try this. Whereas I think most Christians would be like, that's Old Testament stuff. We don't do that anymore. So it wouldn't work for them. So I think the Lord gives us the tools that we need and the tools that we can use in the way that we're going to be able to connect to him through them to assist in that lift.
Okay.
So the question?
Yes and no.
Okay.
You had said that perhaps that sounded like a bad thing that Joseph Smith used the interpreters.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Oh, that it was a mysterious, I forget the word you used, sorcery, perhaps.
My question I took to the Lord was, if the Old Testament says this, Why was Joseph Smith doing that? And I you know what I mean? And so it's like in the whole Revelation, the Lord goes into Aaron, throwing down the staff, and it turns into a snake, and then the magicians of the pharaohs do the same thing, but then his eats theirs to show that the Lord's more powerful. So he, in the Revelation I received, he gave all kinds of examples like that to show that what Satan does, the priestcraft, is just a reflection.
It's not.
Yeah. So that leads into my next question about priestcraft.
Mhm.
The definition, 2 Nephi 11, 106 and the RLDS, I can give you LDS if you want to.
That's okay.
It says, for behold, priestcrafts are that men preach and set themselves up for a light unto the world. They set themselves up, that they may get gain and the praise of the world, but they seek not the welfare of Zion.
Yep.
So priestcraft, to me, the word craft in there means that they're doing it for money. It's a craft, like you take something to a craft show. If you're a basket maker, you make a basket, and that's your basket, and that's your craft. So they've become priests simply for the purpose of lifting themselves up and getting money, getting rich.
I would expand that. First off, not everyone that does that gets rich. I know lots of people. I've met several preachers who are obviously in it for the money, and they do not make any. But I think that the craft part, I think you're right as far as like the weaving, why you're doing it, but I don't think it's always for wealth. I think Nephi says it very clearly that it can be for fame and for other things. If you just want to be a leader, and so therefore you're using priestcraft. So I think you are right, though. It is a multifaceted.
He does. It is included the praise of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be lifting yourself up, getting recognition, and so forth.
Right.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Dave. I'll mute.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Kenneth, go ahead and unmute. You're next.
Okay. You're talking about herbs and stuff. Like, for example, dandelion. A lot of people think that's a weed, but that will help with the diabetes in that if you make a tea out of it and do it, and it's good for food too. I think a lot of things that we make are that God has made is also for medicine. I mean, that's how medicine got started. They noticed all these plants that got people well. They put it in there, and then they make it as a drug. That's how digitalis is. That's foxglove that's been separated to a point where it takes the warning out. You take foxglove, that one is for the heart. But if you take too much of it, that will give you a warning of it not that you're start to feel like you're going to throw up. When that happens, you got to stop, or else too much more, it's going to stop your heart.
Mm-hmm.
But digitalis, they have that warning thing taken out to where a person gets too much digitalis, they're dead. So it's just, I think, like, and there's also a plant called plantain. That's for wounds, stops bleeding. It works real good. I've worked with herbs and stuff. Worked at a health food store. I'll say about that much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Deep fried dandelions are delicious. Christine wanted me to add in here that we also need to look beyond ourselves and realize that plants are necessary to treat the earth, to keep insects, bees, and other animals fed and protected in order to maintain balance. And I love the word of wisdom, how it explains not only, I think the word of wisdom is telling us all things in moderation, But it also says, tobacco is for the goats. And as someone who grew up on a farm, when our goats got sick, we fed them tobacco and it worked. So these things aren't just for us as humans.
Okay, anybody else with questions for Dave?
Deb, I haven't seen the other speakers yet. Oh, wait, there's a hand down there. Looks like Earl.
Oh, Earl, go ahead. We can't hear you, Earl. You're muted, please.
Try that again. I studied agronomy, and we define a weed as the plant out of place.
Okay, we can hardly hear you, Earl. Is it possible to maybe
Sorry.
There you go.
I'm not with it tonight, I guess. I studied agronomy, and we define a weed as a plant out of place. So if all the plants in your garden are useful, there are no weeds there. However, if you find corn in a bean field, that corn is a weed.
Yep.
Just an observation.
Absolutely correct.
Thank you, Earl. Monty, go ahead.
There are parts of the world in which they consider orchids a weed. So, I mean, how well a plant grows in one area or how well it is controllable can determine whether it's classified as a weed.
Bless you.
I don't know if this is on topic or not.
Pardon me, Wednesday. I
No, I
just wanted
forgot
to
to raise
tell
my
him,
hand. That's
have a
on me.
happy trip to Missouri.
Okay,
No,
thanks.
you go right ahead, hon.
Go ahead, Wednesday.
I believe there was someone ahead of me.
No, you're good.
Oh, I wasn't sure if it was relevant or not, but I don't really think there's, I was going to agree with Earl. There's not really a difference between a weed and another plant. And weeds can also be extremely useful. Like sometimes it's nice to have blackberry bramble against the fence, even though technically you didn't grow it there. Or sometimes my grandma would go out into like the woods near the house and pick some things for medicine. None of which were intentionally planted, but were good and useful for us to have around.
Thank you, Wednesday.
I do have another question for David. What is the connection between homeopathy and the Book of Mormon?
Homeopathy in the Book of Mormon?
Yeah.
Do you know the answer to that question? I would say that the connection is more to do with the idea of, so I believe that the Book of Mormon, the purpose of the Book of Mormon is to awaken within us the spirit of prophecy and revelation. And one of the things the Book of Mormon talks about is the idea that when they traveled, they brought plants with them. And so therefore, plants are something that is important. We look at our history as Latter-day Saints. We have a word of wisdom that talks about, kind of gives us a guideline or some ideas or suggestions on what to and not to put into our bodies and what to do with certain herbs outside of our bodies. And so I think that the idea of herbalism and health and all this is tied to our religion in a both practical and spiritual way. As far as having a direct connection to the Book of Mormon, I am not sure that there is one.
Thank you.
Okay, Boyd, go ahead.
There is a connection to the Book of Mormon. In Alma chapter 21, 75, 76. Says, and there were some who died with fevers, which at some seasons of the year were very frequent in the land, but not so much with fevers, because of the excellent qualities of the many plants and roots which God had prepared
Okay.
to remove the cause of the diseases which man was subject by the nature of the climate. God prepared these plants for us to use to cure disease. And yet we're not paying attention to these plants. I mean, we would rather just go to the pharmacy and buy a pill that man made instead of going to the field that God made. I use plants a lot. I got a patch of stinging nettles in the backyard. I used to have a serious problem with allergies in the spring of the year with grass pollen and so forth. Had it for many years. I mean, in spring of the year, I can't hardly breathe. But I learned about stinging nettles a few years ago, and I started making a tea out of it. I drink the tea every day for that time of the season, usually starting about 30 days before the season happens, comes down. And I'd hardly have any symptoms since I started drinking that. I mean, it has been a miracle cure for me. I can go walk outside. I can work outside now. I used to have to be penned in a house. I've had cancer before. I got rid of the cancer. I started eating apple seeds. Got rid of it. Happened twice. Years ago, I changed my diet, and I haven't had cancer problems in many years, but this was back in the 30s, and when I was in my 30s, and I cured it with just simply apples. You have a urinary tract infection, you go out in the field and gather some goldenrod, make a tea out of it. Cleanses your urinary tract. I love what was brought up earlier. Kenneth, I think, was bringing up plantain, and excellent for wounds. It's an antiseptic. Many plants like that. I got a book right here. I don't know if you can see it. This is called Indian Herbology of North America. Oh, this is a great book as a reference. Tell you the various things that have been learned. And there's many other books. There's lots of books on this. But to me, I mean, the herbs that God provided for us, they don't have all the serious side effects, but yet they're very healthy. And like I say, don't have the side effects that pharmaceuticals are known for. And so, I mean, I would rely on plants more than I would anything else. Oh, by the way, I had a serious knee injury one time. I had a horse landed on my knee, about crippled me. I couldn't hardly walk. It was going like this, and I didn't know what to do with it for a few years. And then finally one day, I was thinking about comfrey. Well, how come I didn't try comfrey? I don't know if you guys know anything about comfrey. Comfrey is a weed, but it's a good weed. I mean, it's got lots of good uses to it. Make a poultice out of it. Well, I made a poultice out of it and put that on my knee for a period of several months. I started it. The first time I did it for about 6 weeks. I didn't leave it on there long enough, and I felt it was cured, but it wasn't. And then only to find out later on that I needed to leave it on there about 3 months. And so I used comfrey on there, and it healed my knee. I mean, I could run wind sprints today. I couldn't. I could barely walk. I thought I was going to need knee surgery the way it was going. But I talked to a fellow out in Oregon that has a what is he? He has a clinic for world-class athletes, and he said they use comfrey all the time. And he says it's called the bone knit bone knit herb. And you use that with Solomon seal, which is another herb, and combine it with some magnesium spray, and you can heal bones with it really quickly. And not only bones, ligaments, torn tissue of all kinds. It is outstanding. I'm a big believer in comfrey. So there's just many, many herbs out there that you can use, and I think we should be experts in this stuff. I mean, we that believe in the Book of Mormon, I mean, here we have something in the scriptures that tell us it, leading us in that direction, and we kind of ignore that. We keep running back and forth to the pharmaceuticals and the doctors today that they don't know half the stuff out there that they should. I mean, they should be learning about these herbs. They're the best stuff there is, as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, I love the herbology. I just love the plants that the Lord provided for us. There's a reason. I mean, the Lord knows better than man does, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Anyway,
Thank you, Boyd.
Scripture. Real
Okay.
quick, I am glad you brought up that book. After I did the presentation, because you know, the internet's always listening to everything we do. I got a recommendation for this book, and I went ahead and picked it up. And if you are interested in learning how to do these things, it's not a very thick book, but it actually shows you, like, it tells you information about all the herbs, what they're used for. It tells you how to make them into pills, how to make them into tonics, how to make them into everything. Considering how thin the book is, I was very impressed with how much information was in here. So I did want to, thank you for bringing up that book, because I did want to bring up this book.
Maybe you could put the title of the book in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I had seen John Mueller's hand up. John, did you still have a question?
Nope.
Okay.
Can I answer the question in the chat real quick?
Sure.
Okay. So the question is, what about the attributes of honey and its history in the Book of Mormon? Honey is something I use quite a bit when I get a sore throat or a cough. That mixed with garlic works really, really well. So thank you for bringing that up. And the question was asked, why does the LDS Church use the beehive in their publications? That's tied to the term Deseret from the Book of Ether and the Jaredites, worker bees, that type of thing.
Okay, and the name of the book is Ancient Remedies Revived, that he was referring to.
If you look it up on Amazon, there's two different books. One is quite a bit less expensive, but reading all the reviews, it also has quite a bit less information. So I did spend the extra money and get this one, and I'm glad that I did.
Okay. Kenneth, did you have another question for Dave? Because I know he's pushed for time.
I got something else. There's another book that'll help with that. It's called Back to Eden.
Oh, yeah.
From Jethro Kloss. That's a real good book.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kenneth.
ISBN. Someone's asked about the ISBN.
Yeah. What you said, there's a book that's the right book and another book it's not as good. So I asked if you had the ISBN for the correct book.
Yeah.
You can just put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
When we're done talking, I'll see if I can find it, put it in the chat.
Okay.
I'm not seeing one in here, but there should be one. Usually it's in the front.
Look on the back, like on the USB barcode.
It also has a website, so if I can't find that, it has a I can't see it. A QR code in it for some reason. So it has a copyright, but it may just be one of those self-published books. So it might not have one. I'll see if I can find one. If not, I'll put the website in there. In fact, I'll put the website also. So
yeah, your Aurora Borealis is getting in the way.
Yeah. Sorry, I have a bunch of boxes behind me, and didn't think you guys wanted to see that.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands up, Dave.
All right.
Thank you.
Good conversation, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Paul, it's back to you.
I think I see two Ricks available, so let's ask one of them.
You see Rick, and Ron Smith is here also.
All right, good. Well, I think I saw Rick Gaydusek first. So, and the Gospel Tangents Rick was last one to present, so we'll let him stay on the tail end.
Okay. So Rick Gaydusek, go ahead, please.
Okay. Let me get to share my screen here. Well, there we go. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
All right. Let me start the show. All right. My presentation was about a book that I was told about maybe 20 years ago. Adair's History of the American Indians, and there's one of the covers that I have. Has several different covers. It was written in it was first published in the United States in 1930, but before that it was printed in Europe. Let me see if I can get to that right there. In I think it was the 1700s. Yeah, here it is. 1775. So it spent a lot of time in Europe, but it just got printed here in the United States in 1930. Anyway, it records James Adair wrote this book based on his 30, 40 years experience traveling with, trading with the Native Americans that were living in the southeast United States. Let's see if I can get to a map. There it is. So there's the inside of the flyleaf there. So the tribes, you can barely make them out in their areas, but I've found them throughout the book. So these 5 tribes were the Cherokee, Catawba, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Muskogee, which are commonly referred to as the Creek Indians. But it's funny, the Creek Indians, they live in Muskogee, Oklahoma. So he stated that in his account that he suspected that the things that he observed while living with in and around these tribes made him suspicious, because they had within their life and culture and traditions some things that were familiar to him based on the Torah, which would have been the first 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And so he listed them in this book, and there was 23. So there's 21 Roman numerals, and then 2 more on the following page. So what I did during my presentation, I just went over the ones that I thought were might be important to everyone. So those were the ones I highlighted in blue. And then I went just one by one that they called their deity Yohewa, and wasn't always broken up in those syllables. Sometimes it would be yo, 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 hey, 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 wah, wah, wah. And so that the word was changed in a way when they were singing. And so then they felt like they were a peculiar people above all other nations that were upon the earth. So they had this arrogancy about them, that they were a chosen people by God. They had a belief in angels, and angels being good spirits, and that they would visit people. They had a priesthood organization, and made atonement for sin, and they would be dressed in white during those ceremonies, as well as the people that participated in it, the other people of the tribe. And so each one of these that I've highlighted, I put the scripture after it that could be referenced if you wanted to find proof that God told the Israelites to do these things. And now here, these people in Southeast America or the colonies were doing a very similar thing. One thing that was interesting is they said they never made an idol to worship it. They never made an image of their God. And I think that was back in right here, the second bullet point. No idols, they pay no homage to images, dead persons, heavenly bodies, evil spirits, nor any created image. High priest, okay.
In here.
Another thing that he thought was similar to the Torah and the commandments, the instructions given by Moses, from God to Moses, was they had a fall harvest festival, which you'll find in Leviticus 23, that we're coming up to now in the calendar, which is called tabernacles, Sukkot, or booths, and they brought their produce of the land into a ceremony and offered it to God. They also made a shade house or brush arbor, which is also commanded. The Israelites were commanded to do. Well, I didn't start my timer. So they had a practice of doing a daily sacrifice, and they would offer put the fattiest piece of meat into the fire, which was something that the priests were supposed to do. They weren't supposed to eat any fat of the animal, the sacrifices. They would, another interesting, I thought, was that they wouldn't eat the sinew of the one of the hind legs, which was started back when Jacob became Israel, when he wrestled with the angel, when he was leaving his uncle Laban's land, returning to his father's land. They had laws of uncleanness. During women's menstruation, they would have to separate themselves for a certain amount of time. Men with people with running issues or sores, they would not eat certain animals, and because they said those animals eat dead things, and so they had a strict diet of what could be eaten and not eaten. Birth, okay. So here's what I'm looking for. They would not eat birds of prey, which follows with the Leviticus 11, or amphibians and reptiles. They wouldn't eat those either. They wouldn't eat animals that died of itself, or they suspected it died of itself. According to the Torah, they were supposed to kill a live animal and let its blood, like by cutting its throat, let its blood go on the ground like water and then cover it with dirt. So they didn't eat pork. And they did not consume the blood of any animal either. And there's what I was talking about, Genesis 32 about they would cut out the lower part of the thigh of a deer and not eat it. Now, a lot of these practices over time disappeared as they assimilated into white man's culture. They had cities of refuge where people could flee to if they accidentally killed someone. And when they reached the town, they would be protected from not justice, but from vengeance. So it would give them like due process. And so the Torah also in Numbers 35:10 says there to designate towns of refuge for that purpose. They had the custom of raising the seed to a deceased brother from Deuteronomy 25:5. So if the brother died without having a son, the next brother in age was to perform the marital relations so that woman could have a son. for her dead husband's name, to carry on her dead husband's name. So some implications, critics responded to Dare made up all of his encounters. It's also unknown how these tribes acquired these peculiar customs. It doesn't prove that the tribe originated from the Book of Mormon peoples and may have been a separate migration. And there's other Hebrew type things that they have found in the United States that also prove, or maybe not prove, they've kind of lead to thinking that how did this get here in this farm? A farmer's plowing his field and he turns up something written in Hebrew. The speculation and legend provide an attempt to explain the tribe's presence in the Southeast, the United States, and possible connection to the Hebrews of the Bible. And that is my time. My time is up.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Paul, you're muted. Did you want to say anything, or we're going to hold off on questions now till the other presenters have?
Yes, the nurse is working on me right now, so not a good time for me to talk.
Okay, all right, we'll go ahead then. Let's see, Rick Bennett, are you still with us?
I am.
Okay, we'll go ahead and let you.
Okay, I'll just share my screen really quickly, and kind of these are the same slides I had last week, but I'll just kind of fly through them a little bit. Hopefully you can see that.
Yes, we can.
So my presentation was on the changing stewardship on the Nauvoo and Kirtland properties. So one of the things, Kyle McKay is the LDS church historian. He's a member of the 70. And at the Mormon History Association, he discussed how the LDS sites are becoming less proselytizing. I mean, one of the things they're finding is it's usually LDS members or, Community of Christ or whatever that go. It's not Protestants that come to these sites. And so there's not really as big of a need to proselytize those. But we talked about the Kirtland Nauvoo properties. Those were kind of the headliners. But there were some documents and artifacts as well that were transferred. And then right across the river from Nauvoo is the Heartland Museum. So I showed that a little bit. But of course, back on March 5th, the LDS Church took ownership of the Kirtland Temple and surrounding properties. One of the biggest changes is they will allow photos inside, which is kind of funny because you can't take photos inside any other LDS temple, but Kirtland's different. But they will allow photos inside the Kirtland Temple now. The bell, here's a picture of the bell. I had a special tour. It's apparently they're worried about it crashing through the floor, so they've taken away the rope so you can't ring the bell anymore like used to happen. That's mostly due to safety concerns. Joseph Smith House next to the Kirtland Temple was one of the properties that that were transferred as well. And as far as there's been some mixed results. I think I preferred the Community of Christ focuses on history for some of these buildings. This is the Newell K. Whitney store. And of course, that was actually always under LDS control. But they are more historic presentations than they used to be. There's less proselytizing. They still focus on faith quite a bit. And so there are some mixed results among the different properties. Kind of depends a little bit on the missionary, how good of a tour you do. Some of the Nauvoo properties that were transferred on March 5th this year included the Red Brick Store. The Red Brick Store, which was very disappointing to me when I went as an LDS after the LDS bought it, because when the Community of Christ had it, it was really bustling, and um, uh, you could buy sarsaparilla and Joseph Smith for President T-shirts and things like that. Now that the LDS Church owns kind of both sides of Nauvoo, it would trigger a federal antitrust problem. And so the LDS Church, to avoid that problem, just said, okay, we're not going to sell anything. So it's not nearly as bustling as it used to be. The Mansion House was another one of the properties that were transferred. There's a picture of Loch Mackay and Steve Pineacre there. When we went on a Community of Christ, you'll notice there's slight difference in the color of the signs between the Community of Christ and then the LDS are a little bit more blue, kind of a royal blue. One of the properties that was not transferred was the Smith Family Cemetery, and I got to hang out with Loch Mackay, and he told me a lot of interesting things about the cemetery. But you've got Hiram, Joseph, and Emma's graves right there, as well as the Smith House, which the Smith House was part of the transaction, but the cemetery was not. We had to revisit Paul's archaeological dig at the Times and Seasons site. On the bottom, you can see what it used to look like when Paul was working on it, and on the top, you can see it's just fenced around and kind of weeds growing in there. And nobody knows what's going to happen. I, like Paul, would hope that the LDS Church would restore it, but we'll see. So some of the significant artifacts and documents that were transferred also include what we call the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. Community of Christ would refer to that as the inspired edition of the Bible. There were 7 letters from Joseph to his wife Emma, John Whitmer's History of the Church, original portraits of Joseph and Emma Smith, cornerstone of the Nauvoo House, the original door of the Liberty Jail, and the characters document. And those are just some of the highlights. There were way more than that, but those were kind of the significant ones that I highlighted. The Joseph and Emma paintings are now located in the Church History Museum in Salt Lake City, along with this amazing painting, which I just really love, on where Jesus is appearing in the Kirtland Temple. Some of the other documents: letter from Liberty Jail, letter from Independence Jail, Joseph Smith's Bible that had a lot of his notations in it, and then of course the characters document, which is really interesting. Surprisingly, the Liberty Jail door is also in Salt Lake City. They was transferred there, and so there's a lot of other artifacts and properties, but I'll just keep this short. If you're ever in Nauvoo, you should check out the Phoenician Museum. It's across the river. It's funny because it's like 2 miles across the river from the Nauvoo Temple, but it's about a 45-minute drive because there are no bridges there. And so I showed, this is my family here, and then Mike and Betty LaFontaine in the back. My daughter's missing because she didn't come on the trip with us, but this is what the boat looked like when we went in July. And some of the updated pictures are basically the hull is completely done now, and so you can see what it looked like and what it looks like now. They've really done some amazing work on it, and so these are some photos from their newsletter from August 30th. So really some amazing progress since we saw it in July. So that's just, I mean, that's like 6 weeks later. You can see how much more was there. So anyway, I'll keep mine short and sweet, and that's what I shared.
Okay, thanks, Rick. We'll go with Ron Smith. You're still here with us.
Okay. So let's see if I can find the right one. I can't find my Let's see if this works this way. If it doesn't, let me know.
Okay, we see it.
If I can get this thing out of the way here. Okay, that worked. So I talked about Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy, and it's from Daniel 9:24 through 27, and the connection to the Book of Mormon. And basically, I'll leave out all of the middle stuff. This is the bottom line, that in the 70 weeks prophecy, you have on top what on the top half of this, above the timeline, you have what Daniel actually says. And he says that 70 weeks were given to finish the transgression, make an end of sins, make reconciliation for iniquity, bring everlasting righteousness, seal up the vision and prophecy, and anoint the most holy. And so that's what this prophecy is about. And he says that starting with the command to restore and build Jerusalem, you've got 7 weeks, and the street and the wall will be built again. And after another 62 weeks, so up to week 69, you get Messiah the Prince will come, and then
Ron, excuse me just a minute. We're still only seeing your Daniel's 70-week prophecy screen. Were you wanting us to be seeing something else?
Yes, I was pointing out some completely different stuff and had, okay, I'm going to try and do this differently. My escape isn't even working. Let me,
Now we're seeing the one that says we are shown.
yeah, that's, let me try this over again.
Okay.
I'll do it this way. And you can see all of my stuff. Okay, now you see.
Now we see it. Okay, now we're starting to see it. Yeah.
Right. I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
I usually have this with a monitor on it, so I can see what you're seeing as well as what I'm seeing. And I didn't this time. So on the top half here, above the timeline, you see what's in the 70 weeks prophecy. And he says all the stuff about finishing the transgression, and all of that. And then he says, from the time to the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, there's 7 weeks, and the street and the wall will be built again. And then after another 62 weeks, you have Messiah the Prince that will come. And in this last week, the sacrifice will cease, and he'll confirm the covenant, and he'll be cut off in the midst of the week for others, or it says not for himself, but I'm assuming that means he'll be cut off for others. And all of that sounds like it's talking about Jesus. From our point of view, we can see that easily. And so it's not about an antichrist. It's not about somebody else. It's about Jesus the Messiah. And the problem that, well, if you start with Darius's command in 457 and just translate those weeks, call those weeks of years rather than weeks of days, like everybody does, and you find out that from 457 you get 27 AD for the Messiah the Prince coming. You get 30 AD for the sacrifice ceases, and confirming the covenant until until 34 AD. And for most Christians, that doesn't quite compute because they don't see that Jesus' work continued after his resurrection. And so I put in there, if you start with 4 BC, which a lot of people do for Jesus' birth, then, and you use the Book of Mormon for the timeline, it tells us, well, Luke tells us he was 30 years old, which comes out to 27 AD. The Book of Mormon says that Jesus died in what would have been 30 AD then. And when he talks to the people in the Book of Mormon, he ends the sacrifice then, and he confirms the covenant, and he says he has other sheep that he's going to go to and continues to confirm the covenant. And so with that understanding, it makes that 70 weeks all make sense. It's all contiguous. It's all about Jesus Christ. There is a part that says a prince will come whose people will destroy Jerusalem and the temple. And I believe that's talking about Prince Titus, who came, who was a Roman, and his people destroyed the temple and Jerusalem and totally wiped it out. So the prophecy talks mainly about Jesus. And if you take away the that and say, well, that last week is disconnected from all the rest, and this has to do with the 7 weeks, 7 years of tribulation, and this is talking about an antichrist that's coming, you lose track of the fact that this is the one place where the Messiah is talked about in the Old Testament of the King James Version. So we showed the 70 weeks prophecy of Daniel speaks very specifically about the life, death, and ministry of Jesus Christ, and that the Book of Mormon helps us to understand this prophecy by emphasizing that Jesus continued confirming the covenant after his resurrection. And it's important, I think, one of the reasons, because the rapture theory has turned that 70 weeks prophecy into a story about the Antichrist instead of the story of Jesus Christ. And I did a little thing on the Messiah. It's only used twice in the Old Testament of the King James Version, and they're both in Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy. And yet, in the New Testament, it was well known to Andrew told Simon, we found the Messiah, and the woman at the well says, I know that Messiah cometh. These were common, ordinary people. The woman at the well was in the northern kingdom. Andrew and Simon were in the southern kingdom. Everybody knew this. And yet, if you have just the record that we have in the King James Version, it's only found in this one prophecy. And in the inspired version, you have it found 6 times, 4 times in Genesis, and so that it has the Messiah from the beginning. And of course, that was what Lehi was shown, that there was in the book that he got and he read in his first vision, and he said, oh, this tells about a Messiah who's coming, and that was why they wanted to kill him. They didn't want to know that. This was before the Babylonian captivity, and so who needs a Messiah when you're doing fine, right? And so anyway, either the 70 weeks prophecy was understood commonly to be about the Messiah, or the Messiah is one of those plain and precious things that was restored in the restoration scriptures. And so we showed why the understanding Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy is important. We showed how the Book of Mormon helps us understand the prophecy, and that the 70 weeks prophecy of Daniel speaks very specifically about the life, the death, and the ministry of Jesus Christ. So that was the presentation that I gave. And I might say, if I emailed Paul on this, Merle Hilson wanted to have a copy of this, but he called on my landline, which doesn't have caller ID, and I can't answer it. It only takes messages, and so if I could find somebody that knows his email address, I'd send him to
Merle is on tonight, Ron.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Merle,
Okay.
Merle, can you unmute?
I tried to get back with you, but I couldn't do that because I don't have a way to get back with you. If you send me your email or something, I can or type it in, or well, I'll type in mine or something, and we'll get a chance to make that connection. I'll do it when we get done discussing here.
Okay. Paul, are you awake?
I have not drowsed off quite, but I recognize that I'm not at my normal acuity, and so if you care to continue moderating, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, folks, does anybody have any questions for Ron or for either of the Ricks regarding their presentations? We are a little bit beyond our normal time, but you are, Rick, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, my question is for Ron. They said also to Jesus, "Are you the Messiah, or should we wait for another?" I again found the title of this book. It's about it's written in 1821. It's about what the Jews believed before they changed their tune about waiting on the Messiah. Their Messiah was they referred to as the Word with a capital W. And so when John says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, he was trying to attach Jesus to their belief in this personage called the Word.
Okay, very interesting.
It's a very hard read, but it's fascinating in the middle of it, because it gets into what they believed that now they don't believe anymore. That they did believe in a triune God, but now God is echad and cannot be but one.
And that book is what?
I can put the title in the chat.
Sure.
It's a long title, and I looked for the ISBN while we were waiting, and I think it's a classic reprint. You know how those go.
Yeah.
And so I'm not finding there's a number, but it sure doesn't look like an ISBN because it has a letter in it. But I'll put the title in the chat for everyone.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I was reading. I haven't read extensively on this, but I was looking up some stuff for this presentation, and I came across a Jewish source on the web, and they were downplaying the Messiah because it wasn't found in the Torah, and I thought, well, that's interesting, because I thought it was in the Torah, because of course in the inspired version it's there, it is in Genesis. So that was my wake-up call that, oh, wait a minute, not everybody reads this the same way. So but I do appreciate that, the word.
Okay.
Yeah, the title is not reflective of what it is inside. I guess it is. He's trying to settle an argument with the Unitarians, And so
Okay,
that's going to be in the title.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Roger Gilbert, go ahead, please.
Okay, Rick Bennett, now that we've had 11 classes on the characters document, and you said it's one of the documents that was sold, is it being presented or put out somewhere, or is it just in the Indiana Jones file in the back of a warehouse somewhere? You're muted.
I can speak to that because I attended this past week a presentation at the Church History Library that was all about that document, and they have it on display at the Church History Museum right now.
Is that in Salt Lake?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's being prominently featured there, and they also had a ton of information about the history of it and all the different places that have been published. Like in the 19th century, it was published in lots of different books. And so it was widely used and widely known at that time.
Yeah, and I actually had a picture in my presentation. It was pretty small, but I blew it up. There it is, right there. It's in the Church History Museum right now, and I anticipate it will be there for a while at least.
Okay, well, I'll have to see that. And I guess also, I don't think it was the church, but there was at least a LDS people that purchased the Book of Mormon manuscript, the printer's manuscript that used to be in the Community of Christ Temple.
Yeah, that was the LDS Church bought that for
Oh, they
$35
did?
million.
I didn't know if it
few
was
years ago.
individuals. Okay, is that
No, it
also
was the church.
play somewhere?
I don't believe it's on display, or at least I don't know where and when it is, but I'm sure, pretty sure, that you could, if you asked them, they would show you.
At that same location? At the
There's a church history museum and there's a church history library. My guess is it would be at the library, not the museum, but they're pretty close to each other. They're within a block and a half.
Okay. Well, I got a bucket list trip to Salt Lake City, I guess, coming
For
up.
sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Talk to Robin Jensen. He'll probably know all about it.
Anybody else with questions? I'm not near as good as Paul with asking questions. Sorry, guys. I don't engage the speakers near as well as Paul.
Well, can I ask a question about Paul?
Yes.
Why are you in a hospital room?
You want me to tell him, Paul? You're muted.
I think that was go ahead.
Proceed, Ben. Go ahead and explain.
Okay. So Paul was on his farm on Saturday, and he was climbing into his tractor, and there was a bar that he grabbed onto thinking that it was going to support him, and it did not. And so he fell from the tractor probably 4 or 5 feet, did his gymnastic somersault in the air before he landed on his head and his back. And he has broken 3 vertebrae. He drove himself to the hospital 25 miles away in Leon, Iowa, which was a small hospital. And they determined that he hadn't broken anything. And so long as he could walk, they let him go home. And then he went home, and he had been scheduled to speak in Lamoni on Sunday. So he did that and was in considerable pain after he did that. So then between Tessa and Abigail Barnes, who are good friends, and his daughter, they convinced him that his breathing was somewhat labored and he could possibly be having a blood clot. So they convinced him to go back to Kansas City to his hospital back there. And so he did. And after testing, they found out he broke 3 vertebrae in his back. And so now on Thursday, they're going to try to glue him back together again. Humpty Dumpty. So
I'm so sorry to hear that, Paul.
We're just very fortunate and thankful that it wasn't so much more worse than it could have been.
Thank you.
Well, my heart goes out to you, Paul.
It was a special blessing that my daughter was able to come and counsel and take care of. She also helped me out in the sermon, reading the poetry portions. But for some reason, the poetry about her mother made her cry.
Is that up in your neck, or where were the vertebrae broken?
There's one is the second one down from the neck, and the other two are down below the rib cage.
Oh wow. Well, I'm very sorry. We'll be praying for you, Paul.
Thank you. I appreciate that. By the way, you mentioned at some point the ability to publish on Google Books, I think you said.
Mm-hmm.
Indicating that was
It's Amazon, actually, but yeah.
Amazon. Okay, well, Abigail's looking into that for me.
Yeah, tell her to contact me. It's really easy, actually.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, folks, well, it's just about 9:30, 9:26 I have on my clock. If
Paul may
nobody-
have to give up his dreams of being on the Olympic gymnastics team.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let me sing then. The Lord is blessing me right now, right now. I feel his presence here right now in my soul. I may not be able to see what the Lord has done for me, but I know he's blessing me right now, right now. That's what Rena and I sang together, particularly when things were going tough. And we had the remarkable experience after Rena passed. Lady Walmart happened to encounter me 3 aisles in a row. And so I greeted her with a song, and she responded with that same song. Just amazing that she would be so in tune to that whisper that she came up with that song.
Okay.
So good night.
Good night, Paul. You take care and listen to the doctors.
Hey, that's a funny faced kid you have there.
Yeah. She's begging me to take her outside.
Deb, are you stopping the recording?
Oh, I probably should, huh? Thanks for that reminder.
Good night.
And you guys have it next week because